In recent years, trade wars have become a major talking point in global economics. One of the most significant moves made in this arena came from the US under former President Donald Trump. In a bold announcement, he revealed the imposition of a 20% tariff on all steel and aluminum imports, a move that would set off a chain reaction of global economic implications. But what does this mean for international relations, global trade, and industries within the US itself? Let's dive into the economic ripples caused by these tariffs and explore the effects that are still being felt today. On a Sunday, President Trump made waves in the trade world when he announced that a 20% tariff would be imposed on all steel and aluminum coming into the United States. This meant that any steel or aluminum entering U.S. borders would now face a significant tax, with no exceptions. The announcement came with little warning, leaving many businesses and governments scrambling to understand the full scope of the decision. Trump further indicated that this was just the beginning, promising the introduction of reciprocal tariffs later in the week, effectively creating a system where other countries would face the same trade barriers in return for their own unfair practices. But the decision wasn't without its consequences. Retaliation from several countries was swift and strategic, setting the stage for a broader confrontation on the international trade stage. The announcement didn't go unchallenged. Countries around the globe quickly began to retaliate against the US tariffs, with the European Union leading the charge. In response, the EU implemented additional duties on a number of US goods, ranging from agriculture to machinery. This wasn't just an isolated reaction. Canada, Brazil, China, and Mexico, all key trading partners, quickly followed suit. China, in particular, expressed its frustration, citing the tariffs as a form of economic protectionism, while Canada and Mexico targeted US products that were integral to their own economies. These retaliatory actions sparked concerns not only about strained trade relations, but also about the potential for a full-fledged trade war, one that could disrupt the flow of goods and services across the globe. But the impact of these tariffs wasn't just limited to the immediate retaliation by countries like China, Canada, and the EU. The tariffs also had deeper consequences on global trade relations, further complicating the US's position in dealing with international trade issues. For example, one of the main goals of these tariffs was to push back against unfair trade practices, particularly those by China, such as overproduction of steel. However, by targeting such a broad range of imports, Trump's approach made it harder for the US to build alliances on other global trade issues. What was once a shared concern about things like steel overproduction became a more fragmented conversation, with countries less willing to cooperate on reforms. In the process, the US found itself isolated at the negotiating table, unable to advance key policy goals with some of its closest partners. And the disruption didn't stop there. The tariffs resulted in a drop in the volume of trade for basic metals like steel and aluminum, creating ripples in the global supply chain. The costs of raw materials shot up, and industries that had long relied on affordable imports were left scrambling for alternatives. The effects were seen in nearly every corner of the globe, with uncertainty becoming a constant in the international marketplace. Now, let's zoom in on how these tariffs have affected the US economy, specifically the industries that were supposed to benefit from this policy. One of the most immediate consequences was a significant rise in costs for steel and aluminum, both of which are essential in industries like automotive, construction, and manufacturing. For companies in the US that rely on steel and aluminum, this price hike has meant higher production costs. Take, for example, the automotive industry. Car manufacturers that use steel for their vehicles saw an immediate impact, with many reporting increased costs for production. As a result, some companies were forced to raise prices on vehicles, while others struggled to maintain their competitive edge in a market where profit margins were shrinking. The construction industry also felt the sting. Steel is a vital component in building everything from skyscrapers to bridges, and the increased cost of raw materials trickled down to every facet of the sector. Builders faced higher prices for everything from steel beams to construction tools, ultimately leading to price increases for the end consumer. But it wasn't just about higher prices. The tariffs also led to a reduction in production, as companies found it more expensive and difficult to source the materials they needed. Some industries had to scale back on production or find alternative suppliers, which, as we'll see, disrupted supply chains and added yet another layer of complexity to an already strained economic landscape. As if rising costs and production delays weren't enough, the tariffs also created additional pressure on the U.S. job market. Over 3.4 million Americans work in sectors that heavily consume steel and aluminum, ranging from fabricated steel products to machinery manufacturing. And with production slowed down and costs rising, many of these workers face job insecurity. Layoffs, reduced hours, and even factory shutdowns became a harsh reality for some. Beyond just jobs, the tariffs also contributed to rising inflation in the U.S. economy. As the cost of raw materials climbed, it created a ripple effect throughout various industries. Not only did consumers face higher prices for steel-based products, but goods from other sectors that relied on these materials also saw price increases. This was particularly concerning for middle and low-income households, as the prices of everyday goods, like appliances, cars, and even homes, began to rise. Another significant fallout from these tariffs has been the disruption of global supply chains. As companies sought alternative suppliers to avoid the tariffs, the process of sourcing materials became increasingly complicated. This meant longer lead times, higher transportation costs, and an overall lack of predictability in the supply chain. For businesses that relied on just-in-time delivery models, these disruptions had serious implications, forcing many to reassess their entire procurement strategies. In some cases, companies even considered relocating parts of their operations to countries that were not affected by the tariffs. But even this was a risky proposition, as shifting production overseas presented its own set of challenges, many of which were tied to the ongoing uncertainty in international trade. So, where do we go from here? While the immediate effects of these tariffs have been disruptive, they've also sparked a larger conversation about global trade reform. The imposition of such tariffs on steel and aluminum has raised questions about how the international trade system works and whether it needs a complete overhaul. Some argue that it's time to move beyond neoliberal principles that have long governed trade relations. Issues like steel overproduction, for example, cannot be solved with tariffs alone. There needs to be a more comprehensive global approach to addressing these imbalances, one that fosters cooperation rather than division. As global economies continue to recalibrate in response to these tariffs, one thing is clear: trade policy is no longer just about tariffs and taxes. It's about building a more sustainable, collaborative approach to international commerce, and that will require negotiation, compromise, and a deep understanding of the interconnected nature of our global economy. As we continue to see the effects of the 20 tariffs on steel and aluminum, the global trade landscape remains in flux. The next steps are critical, both for international relations and for the economic stability of industries across the U.S. and beyond. What do you think about these tariffs? Are they helping or hindering global trade? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more updates on global economic issues. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll see you in the next video.